George Bernard Shaw's classic play, Pygmalion, gets at this really fascinating question. Is your identity, your whole place in the world, is it all just locked into the way you speak? Can changing your accent actually change who you are?
So this quote right here, this is the boast that kicks the whole thing off. It comes from this brilliant, but oh so arrogant professor of phonetics, Henry Higgins. And, when he looks at this poor flower girl with her thick Cockney accent, he doesn't see a person. Nope, he sees a scientific challenge, just raw material that he can shape and mold.
So while Higgins is seeing a fun little project, the playwright George Bernard Shaw wants us to see the person at the center of it all. Think about it, when you completely transform someone, what happens to the person they used to be? And maybe even more important, what do you owe the new person you've just created? That's really the dilemma right at the heart of this entire story.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Picture this. It's late, it's pouring rain in London, and a sudden downpour forces this random group of strangers to huddle for shelter under a church portico. And what a mix! You've got these high society ladies, their kind of clumsy son, a proper gentleman, and a poor flower girl. It's like a perfect little snapshot of England's super rigid class system all jammed together in one spot.
And what's so clever here is how Shaw introduces our main characters. He doesn't even give us their names at first, just their roles in society. So we get the flower girl, who's defined by her poverty. We get the note-taker, totally defined by his academic obsession, and the gentleman, defined of course by his class. Right from the jump, it tells you this is going to be a story about labels and the social boxes people get put into. And this, right here, just perfectly illustrates the huge divide that Higgins is so eager to conquer. On the one side, you've got Eliza's actual speech, which to him sounds like a hideous and degrading sound. On the other side, you've got the proper English translation. And for Higgins, that gap isn't just about words. No, it's the entire barrier between the gutter and high society. The tension just flares up immediately. When Eliza spots Higgins writing in his little notebook, she absolutely panics. She's convinced he's a police informant, a copper's narc, who could get her into serious trouble for nothing. This fear of having our character taken away, it just shows you how incredibly fragile life was for someone like her. A simple misunderstanding could literally ruin everything.
So you might be wondering, what's this guy even doing with his notebook? Well, he's a master of phonetics, the science of speech. And let me tell you, this isn't just his job, it's his total obsession. He can tell you where anyone in London is from, right down to the specific street, just by listening to how they talk. To him, a person's voice is it's data, something to be collected and analyzed.
The whole plot really gets kicked into gear by this series of wild coincidences. First off, Eliza randomly calls the young guy Freddie, and that's actually his name. Then, it turns out that our note-taker, Henry Higgins, and the gentleman, Colonel Pickering, are like the two most famous Phoenicians on the planet. And get this, they'd traveled from across the world just to meet each other. It's just one of those nights where it feels like fate is pulling all the strings.
So, running on pure arrogance, and with Pickering getting curious, Higgins makes the bet. The bet that's going to change everything. He just looks at this poor, scared flower girl and basically declares, I can completely remake her identity in just 3 months. The gauntlet has been thrown down.
But wait, here's the twist. The very next morning, Eliza herself shows up on his doorstep. See, she's not just some passive subject in his experiment. She's got her own dream. She doesn't want to be a duchess. She just wants to sound respectable enough to get a job in a flower shop. This is her taking charge of her own life, offering to pay him with the tiny bit of money she has.
So as these two guys are getting all giddy about their little experiment, the first real voice of common sense comes in. And it's not from some intellectual, it's from the housekeeper, Mrs. Pierce. She asks the one crucial question that Higgins and Pickering have totally ignored. What happens to her after it's all over? She's the only one who sees the actual human being they're playing with, and she's worried about what her future will look like.
Right as the experiment is getting underway, a wrench gets thrown into the works. That wrench is Alfred Doolittle, Eliza's father. He's a dustman, but he's also this incredibly charismatic scoundrel who just explodes onto the scene with his own unique, completely shameless take on life, class, and morality.
His first line really says it all, doesn't it? He doesn't come in asking if his daughter's okay, if she's happy. Nope. He sees her as a piece of his property that's been taken, and he's here to get his cut. It's this brutally raw, transactional view of family, and it just shows you a whole different kind of survival instinct.
So what's the price tag on his daughter? £5. Just 5. He's not asking for a fortune, right? Just enough to go on a bit of a bender.
He even proudly calls himself one of the undeserving poor, basically arguing that having morals is a luxury for the middle class, something he just can't afford. And Higgins, who is just completely fascinated by this guy's shameless honesty, gives him the money.
All right, fast forward a few months. It's time for the first big test run. Higgins decides he's going to show off his creation at his mother's afternoon tea party, a polite little gathering of high society. And the plan seems simple enough. Eliza is only allowed to talk about two things: the weather and everyone's health. That's it. The result? It's a spectacular, absolutely hilarious disaster. Her pronunciation is flawless. I mean, she sounds like a total aristocrat. But what she's saying, oh, that is straight from the streets. She starts casually chatting about how her aunt might have been murdered over a new hat, and the guests are just completely baffled.
And then comes the knockout punch. As she's on her way out, young Freddie offers to walk with her. Her response? Walk? Not bloody likely. This iconic line, dropping a curse word in the middle of this polite tea party, just leaves the whole room in stunned silence. The lady mask has just completely shattered.
But here's where it gets really interesting: the reactions. The older mom is, of course, absolutely horrified. Young Freddie, on the other hand, is totally smitten with this strange, fascinating woman. And his sister Clara, who's always trying to be trendy, decides this must be the new small talk. The latest, most fashionable slang. She completely mistakes Eliza's raw authenticity for some kind of new high society act. So after all the guests have left, the sharpest criticism of all comes from Higgins' own mother. She sees right through all their scientific pride and ego. She calls them out for exactly what they are: two grown-up babies playing with a live doll with absolutely no thought for the real-life consequences for the woman at the center of their little game.
And that's the question she leaves them with. And really, it's the one the play leaves with all of us. Sure, you can teach someone to talk like a duchess, but you can't just erase who they were. So, by pulling Eliza out of the gutter, did they save her? Or did they just make her unfit for any world, the one she left behind and the one she can't truly join? It all comes down to this: after you remake a person, what do you owe them?